There's no business like show.
Okay, let's make a start. Welcome everybody and good evening. Before we begin, I wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. We would love to be on this land tonight, all in person. Alumni Reunion is one of the highlights of the year. This is not quite how any of us would have pictured this event, but it's always a pleasure to welcome back our graduates, even if only back in a virtual sense. Thank you for taking the time to be a part of this year's celebration. I'd like to extend my thanks to our class reps who supported this event. Thank you very much. As always, your dedicated time and commitment are really indispensable to the reunion's success. So we won't be able to enjoy the usual buzz of energy and conversation that's associated with reunion, but it remains, I think, a testament to our community to see everybody reconnecting with one another and the law school. This year, for a special start to an unusual reunion, we've enlisted the help of Professor Arnie Weinrib, who taught all honored class years from 1970 to 2015 inclusive, and his classmate from the class of 1965 and his good friend, Hart Pomerantz. Hart and Arnie will reminisce on Hart's experience as a law student, lawyer, and writing comedy in Hollywood with Lorne Michaels. Hart says tonight will be the final comedy skit in a long career. I trust, on the other hand, that it will not be the final Zoom class for Arnie, who remains a popular professor in our JD program. Thank you in advance, Hart and Arnie. While the focus of reunion is to allow you and your classmates to reconnect with one another, for the faculty, it gives us an opportunity to say thank you. Thank you for the many contributions that you've made to the legal profession, to public service, to business, and beyond. You set the standard which our faculty strives to achieve, and our global reputation rests on your shoulders. Thank you also to the countless alumni who contribute their time and expertise in countless ways. Mentorship, guest lectures, through financial support, including those who contributed generously to our bursary campaign. There is no question that our alumni pillar is a key pillar, our alumni community is a key pillar of the faculty's success. On a personal note, as you may know, this is my final reunion as dean. It's been an honor to serve the institution in this capacity. Meeting and getting to know our incredible alumni has indeed been one of the very best things about this job, and I will miss it. Thank you all for your warmth. Without further delay, I invite Arnie and Hart to begin their discussion. Over to you.
Thanks, Ed. Of course, I want to add my welcome to all of you, and it is too bad we're not in the Alaskan Library. And as Ed said, starting with the some of you in the class of 1970, I got a lot of you. And some of you are actually lucky, and I didn't, but we'll see. I just want to give a special shout out to a 1995 grad, David Ujimoto, who emailed me last night to say he'll be watching from Australia, where it's Saturday morning. It's not a good way to spend a Saturday morning, David, but welcome. Okay. Hart. Hart.
First of all, who are you?
They know who I am. You don't have to know.
I went to school with an Arnie Weinrib, but you look like his father. Now tell me, has it been that many years?
Well, it has. You know that when looking at the pictures of you and I,
yes,
when we graduated, in my case, the hair starts growing down instead of up. So it's got to be that's a lot of osmosis. So it's a lot of years.
Well, Arnie, I still have all of my hair. Unfortunately, it's in my brush.
Okay.
But I'm saving it. You never know what science will
never
come
know,
up
right?
with.
Right. It'd be a bomb site too, Okay, so Hart, as you know, Hart and I were classmates. And as a student, Hart was already writing about law and only the way he can. So I want to refer to his first big law thing, and then what he's working on now. His first law article was published in 1966, the year after we graduated, in the Criminal Law Quarterly under the title Judicial Humor, Construction of a Statute. And it was Hart and our classmate Steve Breslin wrote what has been titled a classic fictional case of Regina and Ojibwe, in which the judge determines that a pony, which of course has four legs, a pony with a down pillow on its back is a small bird for the purposes of the statute because it fits the definition as a two-legged animal covered with feathers. In fact, it has four legs, doesn't mean it doesn't have two legs, okay? And that has been reprinted innumerable times, including the Harvard Law Record and the Yale Law Journal, which I just referred to. It's still taught in law schools as statutory interpretation, so-called statutory interpretation. And lately, as Ed actually was mentioning before we went on air, Hart has been writing for the New Yorker. Some of you may have seen his pieces on Sigmund Freud and Albert Einstein, which are both involve masterful dialogues, which it's plausible, you would have said, but not likely. Still, it fits in with their philosophies of how they proceeded. Okay, so Hart, law school. Was it a surprise? Yes, law school. you, Mr. Pomerantz.
Yes, sir.
Was it a surprise you got into U of T, into law school at U of T?
I was surprised, Arnie, really. I was actually shocked because I had applied to dentistry. They let me into law school, I suppose, because I helped the students with their teeth for free. But no, I always thought I could be a lawyer because I was interested in helping people, basically. And I didn't want to be a social worker. And I thought, well, all my friends were going into law school. Why shouldn't I try it, see how I could do? And I came and sat amongst the geniuses in my class and regretted every minute of it for 3 years henceforth.
Right. When you people think about law, but what made you decide that it would actually be for you?
Well, I had a certain facility for arguing and for words, especially at home. When I was about 6 years old, I remember I was taking some cookies out of the cookie jar, and my mother said, if I ever catch you taking them out again before supper, no allowance for 3 weeks. And a few days later, I had a craving for cookies, so I went and took a few. My mother walked in and caught me. She said, I warned you, no allowance for 3 weeks. And I said, Mother, I'm not taking any cookies out. I'm putting some back. That's when I knew I was going to be a lawyer.
That would do it. That would do it.
Legal, circumstantial evidence. It can go either way. And I'm good at looking at the other side of things, and hopefully escaping persecution.
Yeah. We'll come back to some of your escapes later on. Was there any other sort of event that made you think that when you were a kid?
Well, I went to a school, grade school, many years ago, and we had the polio shots. Do you remember that was the first pandemic?
The first pandemic for us, yeah.
Yeah, and that polio was quite terrible, and we had to go out into the schoolyard, and there was a nurse there that would give needles to the whole school. And I didn't want a needle because they go into your skin, and that hurts a lot, And so when the nurse asked me my name, I said it's Pomerantz because they were lining up alphabetically. I said, Zach actually is my first name. Let's go. So I went to the back of the line. But as time went on, of course, it got closer and closer, and people were rubbing their arms and saying it didn't hurt, but there were tears coming down their face, and I knew that it did. So finally, I got to the nurse, and she said to me, "Are you ready for your shot, son?" And I said, "I don't want one." And she said, "You're going to get polio." And I said, "From who?" That's when I knew I was going to be a lawyer.
Well, this is going to replay Hart today. You know that. Okay, so
By the way, are the listeners all wearing masks? Because I'm very concerned. My screen has holes in it here, and I don't want to get sick.
don't worry, just hold your breath for the next half hour, Hart. You'll be okay.
Well, all right.
Okay. So, okay, let me skip a lot of stories about high school. When you so you had to go to university, of course, before, and you went to U of T. What did you major in?
Um, in U of T, the actual university,
The actual university, not
with the Velvet Arbor, Iowa sign
yes,
on it.
that's it.
It should be U of Tree. I
Yeah.
told the dean that, but he didn't care. Anyways, I majored in philosophy. I went into philosophy because, unlike trigonometry and stuff I took in high school, which I couldn't do, I knew philosophy had no answers. And that's what I wanted. I wanted a course where there were no right answers. And at least I could give my version of what they would be and still pass. But I like philosophy, and I like learning about theories of philosophy, especially Zeno. Do you remember Zeno?
I remember him as if it were yesterday.
I think he was in our class.
Yeah.
Little Greek guy with a cane and a beard.
Yeah.
But Zeno, we learned, he created Zeno's paradoxes. And for those of the people who are watching who didn't learn Zeno, he postulated the theory that if you keep on walking halfway to the wall, you never quite get to the wall. It was a brilliant idea back then. So I went home and I said, I'm going to check this out. Yeah, so I tried it at home in my house. And I walked halfway to the wall, and then I walked halfway to the wall again. And at the end of it all, Zeno was correct, except I had broken my nose in 3 places. So part marks for Zeno and O-hip for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's, so you finally graduated from philosophy, and as you say, you got here.
Well, I just want to do one quick other. I was going to take anthropology. I'll do it very fast.
Okay.
And they asked on the exam, what do you call a fossil with both male and female sexual characteristics? And I wrote down fortunate.
It's a good
It
thing
saves a dinner.
Okay, so generally, when you came to the law school, what was the most difficult thing about coming here?
The most difficult thing about when I came to the law school was finding a parking spot. I really, by the time I got there, I didn't know where you park. I thought it was somewhere in Thorold, Ontario, because there was no place anywhere close. So I had to drive home and take the bus down.
Okay, and you did this every day.
I learned about the man on the bus for torts, the reasonable man on the bus. There was nobody reasonable on my bus. If they were reasonable, they would have bought a car.
And what was the best thing about being here?
Pardon me?
And what was the best thing about being here? You know, the atmosphere and stuff.
Well, I liked the law school because it reminded me of, it was built like a submarine, like a U-boat. And the classes, you had to go down these iron spiral stairs to the classrooms in the hull. I mean, it was obviously done by some military guy. Also, the classrooms had no windows at all. And that saved my life because I wanted to jump out many times.
Well,
But the best thing about the law schools, I remember it, is there was a free phone in the hallway. and you could call anybody you wanted. I called all kinds of people in all kinds of countries. They never figured it out, but the bill was quite high. But unfortunately, the phone was free, but they charged for the washrooms.
Right.
And I had wished it was the other way around sometimes.
The reason the law school that was built the way it was because the
Yes.
architect's last job had been building a jail. So he knew enough to build a building without windows. So
Well,
there we were.
he did a good job for that.
Yeah, there were some great profs during our time. Laskin, Wright, Ebo Willis, and actually Dick Risk, who taught a lot of you guys out there, a lot of you people out there.
Right.
It started when Hart and I were in our first year. Tell us, what can you say about Bora Laskin?
Bora Laskin became a statue before he passed away. That's a very unusual thing for a person to do. He was mosaic in his presentation. His hair flowed out like there were brains coming out of his mind into his hair, which he combed every day. And he had beautiful skin, pink complexion, and very, very dignified guy. But unfortunately, for me, well, he was the only professor I ever had who talked in footnotes. I mean, constantly. There was no text, it was all footnotes. And I was quite frightened because I didn't understand him. He was way ahead of me and too lofty. And he once asked me a question in class. It was really frightening.
In constitutional law.
In constitutional law, he pulled my name out of the little box he had. They used to torture people there with the box of names and pull them out when you didn't know. And he pulled out the card and he looked at me and he said, "Mr. Pomerantz." And I had coronary occlusion at the time because I was afraid of the guy. And he said, "What do you think of the egg marketing board case?" And I had never read it. He said, "How do you feel about it?" And I said, "Well, I feel hungry. How do you feel about it?" "I missed breakfast." And he did not laugh. He just turned around and said, "Weinrib, what do you think?"
Yeah, right.
Thank God you were there. I would have had to suffer the rest of the class.
Yeah, right. And what about Dean Wright?
Dean Wright was one of a kind. I mean, he was a walking walrus, this guy. I mean, he was brilliant, and he was almost like the Phantom of the Opera. You know, he had that way about him that he was in a different world, and very, very intelligent, but he had a little bit of a bad temper sometimes. I remember once he taught torts, and he was slightly on the socialist side. I don't know if he was or he wasn't, but he was talking about it. And we had a fellow in our class called David Kilgore who came from out west, and they don't like the socialists too much. He's a real conservative guy. He came to school on a horse. Well, that says a lot. Anyways, he stood up with, bravado, because nobody ever stands up to Dean Wright. And he said, "Dean Wright, I've listened to your lecture and you're nothing but a communist, sir." And Dean Wright, you could see his face turn white angry, and lasers were coming out of his eyes like Star Wars or some terrible thing. And it was so hot, his mustache was starting to smoke. And he said, "Mr. Kilgore, you've just failed your year." And I leaned over to my friend Steve and I said, "How come he gets his marks early?"
Yeah, I remember the event.
You remember that, yeah.
I remember. I was trying to hide under the desk. I was.
So did I, but you were already under it.
Yeah, right.
No room for me.
Right.
This was the wrong place for me. I should have gone to Osgood, but what can you do?
Yeah, right.
We're
here.
I had to tread water.
So, You were asked questions many times in class. Why was that? I mean, a lot of us were asked much more than you were.
Well, I was lucky enough to sit behind Ian Binney, who was 6'2". I'm 5'6". And nobody knew I was in the class. The teachers, I mean, didn't see me because I shielded myself from them behind Ian. But one day Ian was sick and the professor came out and said, "Who are you?" And I said, I'm here to take notes for Ian. I mean, I didn't know what to say. I tried to make myself invisible as possible, but the idea of picking on people who didn't read the cases is unfair. I mean, I had to watch the Tonight Show and learn material and comedy at the same time as being a lawyer because I wanted to be a comedian. So I used my comedy in law. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
Yeah. Well, I remember in tax, not in tax, sorry, in property, Ronald McDonald.
Oh, Ronald McDonald. He went into the hamburger business, didn't he?
He did very well in that, Hart. Very well.
Yeah, he did very well. So Ronald McDonald was, he taught land law or property
Land
law?
law. Land
Law, yeah. Yeah. I think I wrote an answer for him on the exam once that he didn't. Well, it was about land law, and I said I didn't know the answer because most of it was underground, and I couldn't figure it out. So I got not too good a mark for that. But he used to swoop into a class, and he wore a robe. He was the only guy who looked like an English barrister, and he wore this black robe to class to lecture in. I understand from certain people now that he wore nothing under it, but we'll go into that later. That's not for me to say. At any rate, he would start talking in the hallway and just whoosh into class and torture people by picking their name out of that box again. And he said, the one day I remember, he said, A dies. He has 3 siblings, B, C, and D. B is mentally ill. C is in British Columbia and no one's heard from him for 20 years. And C is underwater looking for SeaWorld projects with Jacques Cousteau. Who takes under the will? And he looked at me and he said, Mr. Pomerantz. And I looked back at him. I was in shock. And I said, A died? I just saw him Thursday. He looked so well. You know, it was his smoking, right, Dean? Ronald, it was his smoking. I told him, A, stop smoking for God's sake. You're going to kill yourself. Do you mind? He was a very close friend of mine. I have to go home and grieve. And I just walked out of class that day.
Right.
That's the only way I could avoid answering his question.
Well, but you also, occasionally you'd ask a question. I remember in tax, you asked something that...
Well, I used my philosophy for that, my philosophy mind, because we were taking tax with I think it was Professor Kilgore or something.
Yep.
And I asked him if you, I said, sir, can I declare my mind a wasting asset and take depreciation because I'm running out of comic material? And I said, if the mining companies could do it with ore, why can't I do it with my stuff? He said, Mr. Weinrib. And it's always Mr. Weinrib. Nobody ever answered my questions. And at least I got material for today and it was well worth it.
Yeah. So given all this, Hart, how did you manage exams?
Well, I got reasonable marks. They weren't the high marks. They weren't the lowest marks. I passed every year, even though I didn't particularly think I'd practice as a lawyer. I was just filling in time till they recognized my comic capabilities. But I would write funny answers when there were no real answers in my head. And once in a torts exam, I remember this clearly. It was a question, what would the court do, blah, blah, blah. And I wrote, I submit, I thought I'd get a mark for submit. I submit the court would find the defendant negligent. And this answer is more fully delineated in the paper of the student sitting next to me. And I handed that in. I hope he got some pleasure out of that.
Well, you passed, so that was, was good.
Yeah,
So,
I kept passing into the years and people kept disappearing below me. But I don't know. I was a lucky guy, I guess.
so the next time you had exam was in the bar ad course. So I didn't take the bar ad course, but you did. What was that like?
The bar ad course. Now, was that the tax thing we were talking about?
No. Didn't you take accounting?
Oh, yes, I took accounting. I hate accounting. I still can't do it. I'd never been able to do math. That's why I went into philosophy and law. And the accounting was one of the courses we had to take. And on the exam, you had to balance the books of a large corporation. One question, and you either passed or failed your bar admissions. And I was sweating. And I did the best I could. And I walked out. And on the way out, I was speaking to one of my fellow students. And he asked me, Hart, did you balance? And I said, well, one side did. I thought, at least I'll get part marks.
Well,
But you know, accountants are strange people. You know, accountants.
Sure.
You know, I mean, they're the ones eating their alphabet soup in order.
Yeah, right.
They're
Okay.
strange bunch of people.
Really. So we all, of course, we all had to article actually before the bar ad.
Yeah.
But, it always puzzled me how you got an articling job.
Well, it shouldn't puzzle you. I mean, I just phoned up like everybody else and told them I was you. No, I'm just joking. But my marks were sort of middle of the range, some low, some high. I was not an A student, and you know, I had dyslexia. I shouldn't have gone into Wall in the first place. But anyways, I decided I would start from the top law firm in the city. So I went into the hallway to that free phone and I called Blake, Castles, and Graydon for the articling job. And if you're going to get turned down by the big guys, right?
Right.
I mean, there's no shame in it, right? So the lady came on the phone. She said, Blake, Castles, and Graydon. I said, I'd like to speak to Mr. Blake, please. She says, oh, he's no longer with us. I said, all right, give me Mr. Castles. Oh, he's not with us either. All right, give me Mr. Graydon. I'll talk to him. I'm sorry, sir, he's not with us either. What do you want? I said, I was looking for an articling job, but if you can't keep your partners, I'm not interested. And I hung up.
So that made two of us who didn't get articling jobs at Blake's.
Oh,
But for me, it didn't matter.
no.
So where did you actually article?
Well, I articled at a small firm, Joe Shapiro, barrister, solicitor, and grill.
I see.
He didn't quite make enough money on the law, but he sold hamburgers on the side. I'm just joking, but I articled from my cousin Ralph Brown at Henry and Brown, and his office was right next door to. I'm trying to remember the judge's name. I can't remember now. He passed away. He was on the Court of Appeal. They all passed away. So what can I tell you? You should never go on the Court of Appeal because the next step is not appealable. Sid Robbins was the firm next door. So there's some very good brains on the floor, and we used to walk back and forth. But I got through that searching titles. That's all I did for the whole time. And my principal was a very tough guy. Instead of going back 40 years to search the root of title, he made us go back to Let There Be Light. He was that perfect, you know. It was tough, you know.
I'm sure it was. Okay, Hart. Let's, you- I'd like to talk. I'd like you to talk about your career in New York and in California. But for a year, you practiced criminal law, and you did drugs. I mean,
No, I did
all
not.
criminal law was drugs then. So,
Yeah,
have any
watch your
drug
language,
stories?
Arnie. You can get me into trouble.
Yeah, right.
Although it's allowed now, it wasn't back then. I made
No,
a good living out of that.
yeah.
Uh, but are you talking about the drug
The trial you had
cases?
with the cop didn't identify your guy.
Well, I did a lot of drug cases, as everyone did, and I it was hard to win because the judges weren't pro smoking pot. You know, they just weren't. I don't know why. You would think they would be, but I was had a client there who had been charged with selling drugs to an undercover narcotics agent who was a Mountie, and he got caught and arrested, and I had to defend him. So we were in court, and I said to the Mountie on the stand, how do you know it was my client that sold you the 2 pounds of marijuana? And he said, well, I wrote down his description. First of all, he was my height. I said, he was he? He says, that's for sure. I remember looking him right in the eye. I took my guy from the box and I brought the officer down in front of the judge. The officer was 6'3". My client was 5'8". This is how bad it was. And I said, how do you explain this, officer? He said, I'll tell you something. He was a lot taller that day. Then I knew this is hopeless. You cannot win.
Okay,
So I went into civil law after that.
okay, so then, but first you went to you had a career as a comedic writer, and um, you wrote for Woody Allen and Jerry Lewis and Phyllis Diller and Joan Rivers, and you wrote a lot for Laugh-In, which was the best show on television in the 70s. Um, how did you get to write for Woody Allen?
Well, first of all, you have to know my first job as a lawyer was with my client was my partner in writing, Lorne Michaels.
Right.
And Lorne Michaels is now a multi-millionaire mogul. He's so rich now, he talks with a British accent. And so I brought him from Toronto to Hollywood to write the shows that I was writing. But before we went to Hollywood, he said, you're a lawyer. I said, yes, I am. He said, I want to change my name from Lipowitz. He was Lorne Lipowitz when I knew him, to Lorne Michaels. So I decided to study change of name applications. You had to go before a judge, and there were reasons you had to give for the judge to do it, because he could say, no, you're trying to avoid creditors or something like that. So I did all my work, and we went to the courthouse, and I said, Your Honor, my client's name is Lipowitz, and he wants to change his name to Lorne Michaels, and here are my reasons. And the judge says, I don't need any reasons, Mr. Pomerantz. I said, thank you, Judge Lipschitz, and we walked out. A star was born, and I created a mogul. So I'm responsible for his,
Right.
his career.
You and Judge Lipschitz.
That's right.
So was it fun writing for Phyllis Diller and Rivers and Laugh-In, Rowan and Martin?
It's never funny writing comedy. It's tedious. It's a grind. You're competing with other writers. You're in a room with 12 other writers who think they're funnier than you are. And the guy who had the typewriter who was writing the script, he got all his jokes in, because if he didn't want to type yours, he didn't. It was really a tough grind, and everybody was trying to be the top guy. And I was making $1,000 a week the first week there, and that was the beginning salary. And it's amazing how much money you make in show business. It's not fair. It doesn't make any sense at all that jokes should be worth that kind of money, but that's the way it was. And I don't know how our time is. How are we doing on that?
Just a couple minutes, but we can.
Okay, I I worked for in a hotel for Bernie Ornstein, the Seaway Hotel in downtown Toronto by the lake after articling, and he became the producer of the Phyllis Diller Show, and we used to do comedy back and forth after hours, and he called me up one day and said, "I've seen some of your writing," because we had the same agent, the William Morris Agency, and he said, "We'd like you to come down because Phyllis likes your material." And we went down, and that's how we got started in American show business. We had been doing CBC shows before that.
Right.
But that only lasted about one season, and then I went on to Laugh-In, and that was the top show in the country. And President Nixon even came on and did a shtick, which was, in those days, it was something called "Sock It to Me," and he'd get a pie in the face. And Nixon wouldn't say "sock it to me." He said, "It's sock it towards me." That's improper English. What a schmo. Anyways, he ended up where he deserved.
Yeah.
Him and Trump.
Yeah. So Hart, let me bring you back to some things that we'll remember. You and Lorne Michaels had a show in the early '70s called the Hart and Lorne Terrific Hour. Why did you call it that?
I call it the Terrific Hour because when they wrote it up in the paper, it looked like a good review. Anyone who looked at it would say, "Well, it must be a terrific show," if they read it quickly, So I slipped it in.
Okay, Hart.
That was part of my creativity.
So it was quite popular. Why did they cancel it?
It was taken off of CBC because of high ratings. It's the
Ah.
only network in the world that takes off your show because it's high ratings. The head of programming had a cousin who came up with an idea at a barbecue, and he was going to put him on instead. I mean, I said to him, "This isn't the Make-A-Wish Foundation. This is show business." He didn't get it. CBC is a government agency. They don't care about ratings. They go on forever.
Okay, Hart. Okay, so
And I
you
did
also have a
another show called This Is the Law,
right.
which was the only show about law, and it was a very popular show. We had 2 million viewers a week, or one guy had 2 million television sets. We don't know for sure how it went down, but 2 million viewers a week. That means 10% of the country knew who I was, and I felt quite proud of that show because I could be a lawyer, and they asked funny fact situations. You had to guess what the court would do, and then the host, Austin Willis, would read what the court did, and you were either right or wrong. And it's unique. I'm going to try and sell that to the Americans. I think it'd be a terrific show for them.
Yeah, you and Judge Judy. That would be.
Yeah, Judge Judy makes more money than anybody in show business.
Right. Okay, so the time is up, so I want to leave it, but I want to thank her.
My doctor said that to me too.
But there you are.
Your time is up. I said, "No, thank you. I'll come back Thursday."
I'll keep going. So I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that that Hart is only a comedian. He's a very successful employment lawyer. He has lots of wrongful dismissals. It's a sort of area that's actually meant for Hart. There's always some subterranean humor in wrongful dismissal, right?
Well, I work alone, so I had to dismiss myself once, and I sued myself for severance pay, but it's settled on the way home.
Okay. So let me
go ahead.
So Hart, I just want to thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to thank those of you who managed to stay with us all this time.
I hope they're still there.
Yeah, maybe. You never know.
You never know.
This has been, like some of you will remember, this is like one of my classes. I never managed to end exactly on time. At sort of minutes after 12, I would often say the class is supposed to end at 12. I would often say it's 5 minutes to 12. Everybody would groan, but nobody would leave. So that's like this, Hart. So Let me turn it back. Let me thank Hart and turn it back to Raquel Preston, who will come on and do stuff. It's magic.
Thank you, Arnie.